Hello again, I'm Nicholas Markey of Beach Barbell, physical therapist by day and online fitness coach by night. Today I was going to talk about nocebo. So we already talked about placebo being feeling better or good from what we call non-specific effects. So like if you had shoulder pain, you did something and immediately felt better temporarily, most likely a lot of that is placebo because the tissues in the shoulder aren't probably changing a ton in that short time frame, right? It takes quite some time for tissue to change, like muscle and bone and all that, tendons and all that stuff. So nocebo would be the exact opposite. So nocebo is feeling worse or bad, kind of, you might say immediately, but you can kind of apply it to in general from, something non-specific. So a good example of nocebo is where a lot of times people will say the term degenerative disc disease, maybe even herniated disc, bone on bone, kind of these really slip disc, kind of these really like scary sounding words. And since we know that sometimes those things that we see on imaging like MRIs and stuff isn't necessarily fully responsible or maybe even at all responsible for the pain someone is experiencing, then kind of using those terms could actually cause more harm than good. So the actual like MRI result that's saying, end stage arthritis with minimal joint space, and so then the doctor just gives it in layman's terms and says, oh, you're bone on bone, could actually cause a lot more harm than good, because what might happen then is that person then may start choosing worse health choices. So maybe they stop exercising because they feel like they might be damaging something, because they're like, oh, it's bone on bone, I'm not going to go exercise, I'm going to really be breaking down stuff here. So the nocebo is coming from the fact that this kind of narrative was given to this person, and they then ended up leading into worse outcomes because the person started to make probably choices that were not so good for in terms of their health. Another nocebo could be just also the general demeanor of maybe the clinician with the patient. So maybe if they're not that encouraging or almost fatalistic. I've seen it in cases where patient comes in and, they're like, oh, well, how are you doing? They're like, I'm okay. And then have you been doing your home exercises? And the patient's like, no. And then the therapist would get all kind of butthurt. Well, how do you expect you're going to get any better if you don't do them? And it's like, you're sitting there thinking, and you're like, okay, so if we're looking at placebo and nocebo, is that kind of how you speak to somebody, your tone and how you present to somebody, helpful or hurtful, right? So if you react to somebody like that, it's possible that could be kind of a nocebo, because then that person might be like, wow, this person's not very nice, and maybe they don't feel better, right? It's kind of the opposite we talked about placebo, where if you're kind of upbeat and positive and encouraging, you might be able to enhance any placebo you get, because they're like, the person's feeling good about the situation and the person they're working with. Whereas on the opposite, if you're kind of flat, you just don't come off like you care, and maybe just are kind of like a jerk with what you're saying to them, maybe you actually enhance the nocebo and de-enhance the placebo. Maybe the person feels worse, right? Like if you looked at the exact same intervention, say that you could clone the patient, and they went to one therapist who was very upbeat and positive, like, hey, you got this, fist bump, high five, and great set, great exercise. It's very possible that person's going to feel a lot better from the after you ask them at the end, well, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And the person's like, I feel pretty good. That was a great exercise session. Whereas if you got a person who's just kind of like, whatever, just do 10, whatever, and that person, ask them at the end, how do you feel? They might just be like, I don't know, I'm kind of achy now. You could have a very different terms of experience, and then what that might do in the long run is might make that person less likely to want to continue doing healthy things like exercise because they just didn't get a good experience. That's where they say maybe that is where like that manual therapy stuff might be beneficial. Like from the placebo end is maybe you do a lot of good exercise and then you give them a 5-minute massage, hey, good job, massage the area. And they're like, oh, I feel good. I'm like, rocking and rolling today, you kind of enhance the experience, and that person may very well buy into the whole situation because they're just feeling good about it and they feel like positive and happy. Happiness is okay and probably should be sought out because at the end of the day, we're trying to help improve. The whole point of medicine, physical therapy and medicine in general, is to help improve people's lives, so happiness is a big part of that. Do they have to be happy every second of the day? No, but when they're experiencing you, the clinician, the therapist, chances are they should probably be happier more than not. It doesn't mean they have to, like they're doing, it's completely easy and they're not doing anything, but to really kind of work against the nocebo is, minimize the damage language, like, oh, this is damaged, your discs are slipped and you're bone on bone and blah, blah, blah kind of crap, which might make them more fearful, like that nocebo on them, and enhance the, you're a strong, adaptable human being. Let's put a challenge in front of you that seems reasonable and let's rise to that challenge. Let's see what we can do. Let's climb that, mountaintop. And oftentimes people love that. People love challenges of any age, kids, adults, older adults, elders, everyone likes to see like a little challenge and then they fight it against it and then they rise to that challenge. And maybe what if they don't get to all the way to the challenge, but then that gives them motivation of like, oh, okay, I got part of the way there, but I'm going to get there next way. And if you're at the same time, you as the therapist are very, very positive and upbeat, you're going to enhance that placebo. Whereas if you're on the opposite end where it's just kind of like, everything's cookie cutter, doesn't really seem like you're listening, doesn't really seem like you care, chances are like they're not going to have that positive experience. And in the long run, maybe you're actually doing a disservice to this person because maybe they're like now associating exercise with suckiness instead of happiness, right? And we're trying to get people to be more active and exercise and move their bodies and get stronger and get bigger muscles and bones or stronger bones and stuff. So it's like, let's try to do less of this nocebo where we don't come off like a genuine human being that cares for this person in front of us. And let's actually show them that we care. So that's my talk on nocebo, mostly kind of from a therapist angle, but you could apply some of this logic to really any situation, which is interpersonal relationships and, doctor-patient relationships. But obviously I'm a physical therapist, so that's kind of the experience I'm like trying to expose to y'all. So anyways, thanks for listening and watching. Again, I'm Nicholas Markey, physical therapist, Beach Barbell, and I will see you next time. Peace.